Scott buried his face in Goldie's hair. He could do this. He could make amends. But to do this, Golden had to know. Scott had to tell him. To be frank, Scott wasn't sure if this conversation would benefit Goldie, or if it would simply ease Scott's own conscience. Regardless, he pressed on. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Scott confessed. "I never meant to hurt you, to make you feel alone." William and Scott had built the Fazbear Diner's performers as a team. 2 were meant to be on stage, and the 3rd was for backup. They were designed to always work together. That had been the original plan. However, that plan did not factor in each animatronic coming into their own. Suddenly, Spring Bonnie was a goofball. Fredbear was curious and yet reserved. And Golden Freddy was rather shy, but very sweet. Throughout Scott's workday, he found himself seeking out the animatronics company. He'd stretch out his time with each of them during their maintenance check-ins and in their repairs. He'd start each day with a good morning to Spring Bonnie, Fredbear Fazbear, and Golden Freddy. Then, he'd end each day saying good night to Spring Bonnie, Fredbear Fazbear, and Golden Freddy. Scott never could have dreamed that his cheerful performers would go through such tragedy. To prevent himself from spiraling, Scott gave Goldie a soft squeeze. He felt a tentative paw rest on his chest. The yellow bear leaned into Scott, but Goldie remained quiet. Scott hoped that Goldie was listening. "I wish I could travel back in time and keep you safe," he whispered. Oh, what he'd do for just one yesterday. He'd go back and shield Goldie from everything, from the harassment and from this awful isolation. If he could go back, why not go back even further? "I'd keep Fredbear and Spring safe too," he promised. And he meant it. He'd go back in time to stop this madness from even happening. Before the first child went missing, before Circus Baby had been built, before Scott and Goldie had lost their families. Scott would build some kind of barrier around the stage, so no child would get shoved in Fredbear's mouth. He'd shred Circus Baby's blueprints and seal off William's bunker, so William would focus on their diner and he wouldn't have lost his way. Scott would cover the diner in security cameras. He'd put up as many as possible, so no child would vanish without a trace. If Scott could do all that, then Fredbear wouldn't have been carted off to evidence. Spring wouldn't have disappeared, and Goldie would have never been abandoned. Then, Daisy, Isaac, and Michael would all be at home with Scott. Isaac would be playing make-believe with his Fred plush. Daisy would be tinkering away at her mangle toy. And Michael, oh Michael, he'd have the time to figure out what he wanted his life to be. Scott wished with all his heart that he could have saved them all from their fates. Hello, my lovely cupcakes. My darling, wonderful cupcakes. Elsie wrote here, and welcome back to our show. I hope you guys enjoyed this emotional episode of the comic. I need the comic to not be this emotional. This comic is still ongoing, but I have been writing a little bit of Spring's comic, Spring's Red Bow Tie, and there's a couple of chapters that are just pure fluff. This is why. Whenever I write really sad stuff, I end up filtering back to writing like I write really sad stuff and then I write really fluffy stuff next to each other, so that way I don't get sad. So as soon as we get back to spring Bonnie's red bow tie, I promise we're gonna have a lot of fluffy moments, because this has been really sad for a really long time. Oh my goodness. But yes, in this we actually got to learn about Scott caring about his animatronics and what he could have done to fix this. Also, a little bit of lore explained for the comic, where essentially, because that is a part of the FNAF lore, is it's kind of assumed that all the animatronics, the reasons why they have souls and entities, is because of the humans that possessed them before, which I'm pretty sure is canon. Kinda depends on who you ask. That the children who were killed took the soul over of the animatronics, which, you know, okay. I don't fully go with that storyline. Mostly in the comics, I don't want to ship children together, especially dead children together. That just feels kind of, at least not in that way, it just feels kind of eh. That, and in my mind, all the kids have gone to rest, essentially. Because when FNAF 4 came out, I think it was FNAF 4? I'm blanking on the game, where's the sister location? There's a game where essentially the crying child, I think it's either Isaac or Michael, I'm not quite sure which the kid is, but there's a mini game where you go through and give cake to all the kids as the puppet. And then there's another one where you go through on the party and you gotta give all these kids cake. I think it's FNAF 4. I think. I don't honestly remember, but there is a part of it where all the kids' souls get to put to rest. But there's still more FNAF games after that. So in my mind, there are ghosts that possess the animatronics, and actually, let me rephrase. In this FNAF alternate universe, the comic alternate universe, yes, the animatronics are possessed by ghosts. But does that mean that that their personalities come from these ghosts? No. In this lore, this version of the story, again, not canon to the actual FNAF lore, this is just for the alternate universe of the comic, the animatronics have actually gained sentience on their own. Mostly because I wanted that. I wanted to ship the actual animatronics together and not the kids. So yes, so the kids are important to the story. I don't think they actually become the kids eventually do become like background characters, and I think they do become more relevant as the story goes on, but right now they're not in this planned for this like era of the story. Maybe down the road I need to figure out how to portray them correctly, so put a pin in that. But yeah, we got some lore about how these animatronics have sentience and how Scott actually grew to really care about them. But his whole world kind of exploded within a very quick time. And I think writing this has actually kind of helped me come to terms. So the last couple of years, I've gone through a lot of grief. I've lost a lot of people nearby me who are my family, who still are my family, who are no longer with me. And I learned during that grief process that I think I was able to process and show you guys through some of these chapters, is that grief blinds you. It, at least in my case and in Scott's case, it makes your whole world tilt upside down, and then suddenly a lot of things don't matter. It doesn't take away from the value those things still have, but because your mind is so fixated on this sadness that you can't see anything else. So giving Scott this grief that he lost 3 of his kids in a very short time. I think just for this story, it probably took place over a year is what I'm gonna say, just so that way it's a little more spaced out. But I'm pretty sure it all happened at once, kind of. So Scott wasn't doing too well. So I do admit this actually helps me process a lot of emotions, which I appreciate. And also, it's just, I like having to stretch out and write these stories. And we gotta see a little what if of what could have been. Where maybe if Scott did take those extra precautions and listened more to his gut and was more cautious, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. But maybe it still would have. Scott can say that our phone guy can go back and say that this is what would have happened and he would have prevented all this from happening. But he doesn't know William's mind. Scott needs to forgive himself for the past so that way he can focus on the future. And even better, focus on the present. I'm hoping this will help him, but he still has a lot to learn. Oh my goodness, this ending credits got really long. But thank you guys thank you all. Hopefully thank you all for enjoying this during my rambling. I got really invested. As you guys can tell, I really care about these comics. And also, I'm having a lot of fun. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. I will see you next time on our lovely show. Woo, crap. Bye.